This is part 2 of my series about understanding Western civilization. If you have not seen my first video, I encourage you to go back and watch part 1 because I will be talking about a lot of the same things. I will be doing some review, but it would be better if you watch part 1 and then part 2. So if you're still watching this, that probably means you watched part 1, and we can begin. Last time, we talked about a time period around roughly 3,500 BCE. So that is about 3,500 years before the year 0. In China, this was before the Xia dynasty. If we go west to the Middle East, we reach the area that we have been talking about. As I explained last time, the Middle East is a term that we use today, but in the past, it would have been called Mesopotamia, which means the land between the rivers. The Fertile Crescent, fertile means good for farming. Crescent means half moon shape. So this was the Fertile Crescent. It was good for farming. And Mesopotamia was in the Fertile Crescent. Mesopotamia was around this sort of area. In Mesopotamia, there are two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. The Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, at that time, this place was extremely green. It would have been very good for farming. That is why a lot of the earliest civilizations developed here. Mesopotamia was a region inside of that area, and there was a civilization there that was called Sumer. Sumer was a civilization. And we talked about one city inside of Sumer. One city inside of Sumer, which was Uruk. And Uruk was a city with a king. King Gilgamesh, and the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic, Shi. And the Epic of Gilgamesh is probably the oldest story ever written down, maybe the oldest story that we still have knowledge of today, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Let's do a quick review of the Epic of Gilgamesh. King Gilgamesh was a very bad king. He does a lot of terrible things. People cry out for help, and so the gods create Enkidu to challenge him. Gilgamesh orders a woman to sleep with Enkidu, and Enkidu loses his innocence, which is an important idea that we will talk about later when we learn about other stories. Enkidu has lost his innocence. He was a wild man, but now, because he has slept with a woman, he has been civilized a little bit. He still goes to do his job, which is to challenge Gilgamesh. They fight, they see that they are equals, and the fight is called off. They become friends. They go on adventures. One adventure they have is to kill the bull of God, or one of the gods, which of course makes that goddess very angry. She makes Enkidu sick, Enkidu dies, and Gilgamesh becomes very worried that he too will die. On his journeys, he goes to find out how he can live forever, how he can be immortal, and that brings him to Utnapishtim. Last time I talked about how Utnapishtim was a man who lived forever, and so did his wife. I didn't really talk about why he could live forever. The gods were planning to destroy the world and all of the people in it with a big flood because the people of the world were all so wicked. They were all so evil. However, Utnapishtim was the one good man, so he and his wife were warned about the flood and given instructions about how to build a boat that would help them survive. They do this, they spend many days, weeks on that boat. Utnapishtim sends out birds when he is on the boat so that the birds can check if there is any dry land. Every day the birds come back because there's no dry land. But one day the bird does not come back, so that means the dry land is appearing again. When the waters go down, there is a new world and they recreate humanity. They are also given the gift of living forever. Utnapishtim cannot help Gilgamesh live forever. They say he can try to find a secret plant that, if eaten, will let him live forever. Gilgamesh finds it, but he accidentally lets a snake eat it. The snake sheds its skin, loses its skin because it can now live forever. So its skin is shed and it is like a new snake. Now, I'm talking about all of this again because these ideas in this story are going to be very important again when I talk about Israel, okay? So let's take a break from talking about that and let's go talk about two other places. If you look at the map today, all of these places have different names, but a place that would have been there thousands of years ago was Israel. And the Jewish people lived in Israel. They were creating a kingdom around 1000 BC until around 700 BC when they were destroyed by other civilizations. One of those civilizations first was Assyria. There was a kingdom, an empire, Assyria, that was really powerful. Assyria takes Israel. At that time, there are two kingdoms. The northern kingdom, I believe it's the northern kingdom, is sent to live in Mesopotamia. And the southern kingdom continues for about another 100 or 200 years. And the southern kingdom is eventually destroyed by another powerful city, Babylon. A lot of those people are sent to live in Babylon. So this is what starts something known as the Jewish exile. The Jewish exile. Exile is a word that means sent away as a punishment. If you do something wrong, you might be exiled. You must leave and never return. So there was a Jewish exile, and a lot of those Jewish people had to leave and live in those other cities. Now, this is part of the reason why 2,000 years later today, 2,000 years later, maybe more than that, the Jewish people still believe that this land belongs to them. Even though so many years have passed, even though so many people who are not Jewish live there now, the Jewish people still feel that they have a right to this area. And it's a very complicated issue, and I'm not here to say today what is right or what is wrong. I'm just telling you the facts. So the Jewish people were exiled and sent to live in these other kingdoms, and that was around 600 or 500 BC. 600 or 500 BC. Now, at that time, the Jewish people were starting to write down a lot of their stories that would make up the Jewish religion. And obviously, they would be influenced by the stories that they learned in these new places. They would be influenced probably by the Gilgamesh story. They would be influenced as well by another story that people told in Babylon. Another story that people told in Babylon. They had a creation story. I'm going to tell you the creation story as it was told in Babylon, and then I'm going to talk to you about the creation story as it was told in the Jewish religion, and we'll see the comparisons. In Babylon, in their creation story, everything was chaotic waters. Chaos and waters. Eventually, those waters separated. The waters separated, and there was fresh water Fresh water means water with no salt. And then salt water. The fresh water was Apsu, and the salt water was Tiamat. And they were a male and a female god. Apsu, the god of fresh water, was a male god. Tiamat, the goddess of salt water, was a female goddess. Between them, they had many children who were also gods. Apsu did not like his children. They were too noisy. So he kind of wanted to get rid of them. Tiamat defended them, but their relationship continued to get worse, and one of their children killed Apsu. Tiamat is very angry about this, of course, so she decides she is going to kill all of her children. Her children fight back, and she is destroyed. Now the children can start a new generation of gods, and that is where everything comes from. In this picture, you can see Tiamat's children fighting Tiamat, who is often depicted as a dragon, a serpent, a giant serpent. Now you may be asking, what does this have to do with the Jewish religion? Well, let's find out. The Jewish religion is recorded in a book called the Old Testament. The Old Testament is a word used by Christians. Christians call it the Old Testament, and then the Christians also have the New Testament. The Jewish people don't have the New Testament. The New Testament is about Jesus. And obviously, the Jewish people don't believe Jesus was the Son of God, so they don't read the New Testament. The Jewish people read the Old Testament. Obviously, they wouldn't call it Old Testament because for the Jews, there is no New Testament. They call it something like the Tanakh. The Tanakh is not really a book. It is a library. It is many, many books put together. Some books are left out and some books are left in. In the future, we'll talk about some of the books that were left out because they can be very interesting. And it's really exciting, I think, to talk about why those books were left out and why other books were put into the Bible. Now, in the Bible, the first book is called Genesis. Genesis tells the creation story. We just learned the creation story of Babylon. Let's talk about the Jewish creation story. First, there was chaos, and God separated the chaos, which is described as waters. There is the deep, the face of the deep, and God separates that so that the waters are separate, and then he can create land, and every day God creates a new thing. And then on the seventh day, he rests because his work is complete. And that is why the seventh day, which is Sunday, is not a working day. It has always been a resting day because it was the day that God rested. Now, it's very interesting because in the Bible, the deep is a word tehom. That word shares a history with the word Tiamat, who was the goddess, the Babylonian goddess of salt water. God was moving over the face of Tiamat. Tiamat was in the deep. Tiamat, the goddess of salt water, was the salt water at the beginning of chaos. Now, God creates the first generation of humans, Adam and Eve. There are two creation stories in the Bible. There is a creation of Adam and Eve together, and then if you keep reading to the next chapter, there is another creation story. Adam is created first, and Eve is created second out of the rib, the side of Adam. So why are both of these stories here? They obviously contradict each other. Well, In the past, they might not have cared so much. They might have seen the contradiction. They didn't know which one was accurate, so they put them both in. They are forbidden from eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's the only thing they are not allowed to do. The snake comes along. You can see the snake here. The snake first speaks to Eve. The snake says, "Why don't you eat this apple?" God said you can't eat that apple because he knows you will become like gods when you eat it. Eve eats the apple, and then Eve gives Adam an apple to eat as well, and he does eat it. Instantly, they realize they are naked. They have knowledge of their nakedness. And like in the Gilgamesh story, Enkidu loses his innocence. Adam and Eve also experience a loss of innocence. This is a theme that is returning, this idea of the loss of innocence. Adam and Eve are now a little bit like gods because they are not innocent anymore. They are not like children. They understand what it means to do right or what it means to do wrong. When parents raise children, sometimes children do things they don't understand that what they did was bad. Now Adam and Eve do know this, which means that they are able to have free will. They are able to choose to be good or they can choose to be evil. Before they had that knowledge, it wasn't their fault if they chose to be good or chose to be evil. But now they know the difference, and now you must make the right choice. Now you have a duty, an obligation to do the right thing. There is a punishment. They must leave paradise. They must leave this perfect garden where food grows and they don't have to work. Adam is punished by needing to grow his food, and it is very difficult. Eve is punished by needing to give birth. She will become pregnant and endure great pain to have a child. That is the woman's punishment. God wanted us to have free will, so he allowed us to choose, make our first choice. Now we can make the choice to be good, or we can make the choice to be bad. And because we have the choice to be good or be bad, we have the freedom to redeem ourselves. We have the freedom to become better people. That's a very simplistic answer, and philosophers have talked about this for centuries. In the next section, we learn about the descendants, the children of Adam and Eve. First, there is Noah. Noah is a man who is the only good person on earth, the only one left. God gets really annoyed by how many awful people there are, so he's going to kill them all. Now, you'll recognize this from the Gilgamesh story. Utnapishtim was told he was the only good person on earth, and so everybody would be killed except Utnapishtim and his wife. There would be a flood. They can build a boat. They can survive. Similarly, in the story of the creation from Babylon, Apsu doesn't like his children because they're too noisy. He wants to kill them all with a big flood. Now, in the story, Utnapishtim is replaced by Noah. Noah and his wife and his children get on. In this version, they bring all of the animals of the world. Noah sends out a bird to see if the bird will come back, just like Utnapishtim did. One day the bird does not come back, so they know land has appeared. They land, they get off the boat, and they start a new generation of people. God decides to make a covenant. Covenant is like a promise. It's like a contract. God makes a covenant with one of Noah's children, Abraham, and he says, "Our covenant is this: I will be your God, you will worship me, and I will take care of all of your children. I will make your children into a great nation," says God. Today, people who are Jewish say that Abraham is their ancestor. Abraham is their ancestor. God made this covenant only with the children of Abraham. And that is why you can't actually become Jewish. Christians believe you can become Christian, but it's not easy to become Jewish. You usually have to marry into the Jewish religion, and some people in the Jewish religion don't think you should even be allowed to be Jewish if you marry a Jewish person. You must have Jewish parents, at least one Jewish parent, and then you can become Jewish, because the promise, the contract, the covenant of God was made with Abraham and Abraham's children only. Judaism, the Jewish religion, is an exclusive religion. Exclusive. It leaves out other people. And Christianity is an inclusive religion. Christianity wants to have people. That is why Christianity has spread so much. It's also why Christians cared a lot whether other people were Christians or not. We'll talk about that more in the future. So everybody, today we talked about a lot. We talked about, again, the Epic of Gilgamesh from Uruk. We talked about the creation story from Babylon. And we talked about the creation story from the Jewish people who were sent on an exile to live in Babylon and begin the Jewish exile. Exile is a word that means you are sent away as punishment. And that is why today we refer to something as the Jewish diaspora. A diaspora is a complicated word that means spread out. There's also today a Chinese diaspora. The Chinese people have spread out all over the world, just like Jewish people. Jewish people have spread out all over the world, looking for a place that is right for them. Recently, lots of Jewish people are beginning to go back to Israel, wanting to make it a home for Jewish people again. That is one way that ancient history has really affected modern day politics. You may be wondering, why do I need to know so much about these ancient religions? And that's why. Another reason, as you'll see in the future, is that Europe was a Christian civilization, and they would fight whole wars because of how they understood sentences of the Bible. If you don't understand these ancient religions, well, I would say you can't understand Western history. And that's why this kind of video, I think, is important. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope it's not too long, but this is complicated stuff. So if you liked this, please leave me a comment, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye. 再见.